Hi, my name is Chelsea. I am a ballet teacher and a ballet teaching methods expert. I've been teaching in classrooms in recreational, competitive, and pre-professional schools for over 25 years, and I have my MFA with an emphasis on integrating artistry and technique. Today we're going to talk about how the progression of jumps and the progression of pointe vocabulary mirror each other. Teaching pointe is something that I get a lot of questions about, a lot of when should I do this? When should I do that? But the progression is really not that different from what we've already been doing. So if we think of pointe work as a mirror in progression to jumps, the easiest work is 2 feet to 2 feet. And then the next level of difficulty is 2 feet to 1. And then 1 foot to 2. And then 1 foot to the other. And then 1 foot to the same foot. So what does that progression look like? Let's go over it. So the simplest jumps are 2 feet to 2 feet. Just sautés in first, in second, in fifth, whatever, sautés. So the simplest thing to do in your pointe class, once your students are ready to be in the center, would be relevés from 2 feet to 2 feet. In first, in second, do an échappé as your next progression. 2 feet to 2 feet, that's your baseline. The next jump would be 2 feet to 1 foot. So with your little dancers, this looks like, you start in first position and you jump to a tendu. Because you start on 2 feet and you land with your weight on 1 foot. For your intermediate dancers, these are your sissons. They start on 2 feet, they land on 1 foot. So in your pointe class, yes, sisson relevé would be a part of that tier of training, but it's at the advanced end of that because it also involves a weight transfer and you have your leg in a big shape, which means you have a lot of weight away from your midline. So there are layers to that. So the simplest example of 2 feet to 1 foot would be a relevé to coup de pied or a relevé to retiré. The third level of jumping would be 1 foot to 2 feet. So these would be your assemblées because you dégagé, you've got all your weight on 1 foot, you jump, you land on 2 feet. The most obvious example in a pointe class would be a relevé assemblée, which is just, you tendu en fendu, and then you suck that leg right up under you into a closed fifth position as your relevé. So the fourth progression in the difficulty of jumps, and by difficulty I mean what requires the most strength, particularly in the feet, but also in the core. So the fourth progression would be 1 foot to the other. These are your jetés. In a pointe class, these are your piqués. So a piqué, whether you're piquéing into a susu or into a shape or into a turn, piqué is 1 foot to the other, which makes it harder than 2 feet to 1. And then the hardest level of jump, like the jumps that require the most strength, are 1 foot to the same foot. And with our beginners, we start this as a hop. You know how 3-year-olds are bad at hopping? It's because it's really hard. And when we're evaluating kids for pointe prep, are they ready for a pointe class? One of the things that you look at is their temps levés. Can they do 16 temps levés and point their foot every time? In a pointe class, this translates into things like a lot of ballonets along a diagonal, or pointe turns, or Italian pointes. These things, anything that's just a continuous relevé on the same foot, that is your hardest level. Let's back up just a little bit. I did mention that piqué is in the 4th tier, whereas a spring to relevé is in just the 2nd. So a piqué turn in terms of strength is actually more demanding than a pirouette from 5th. Logically, that would mean that we teach pirouette from 5th before we teach soutenu turn or piqué turn. When I started looking at how I was teaching by this logic, where the pointe work and the progression of jumps, difficulty of jumps mirrors, I kind of had trouble with that. I personally, as a student, learned piqué turn well before I learned pirouette. When I started teaching, I was told to teach soutenu turn and piqué turn well before pirouette. So it was ingrained in me to do it this other way. But logic tends to make sense. So I figured, hey, why don't I try it this way? If I don't like it, worst case scenario, after a couple weeks, I go back. That's not actually a huge deal. I will not be going back. When you do the pirouette from 5th, before the piqué turn or the soutenu turn, there are just so many So many good things happening here. Thing number one, you avoid the bent knee on the way up. People tend to do that when they either are afraid of what they're about to do or they are not strong enough to do what they are about to do. And if you teach the pirouette from fifth first, if you follow the progression, they will be strong enough. And also, if you can pirouette from fifth, a piqué turn does not seem that scary because pirouette from fifth is hard, right? It seems hard. But when you look at it in terms of strength, again, you're going from 2 feet to 1. So you have a lot of push. You're not going anywhere. All you have to do is keep yourself there. And then you have no friction. So you just kind of like right around, no big deal. Whereas a piqué turn or a soutenu turn is 1 foot to the other. So it requires more strength. It travels through space. So you need to be able to maintain your alignment in motion. That's a whole new thing. You're changing where you were looking to where you're going to be looking. There's just a lot more going on. When I teach my Pointe classes, it's the end of the first year and we start doing really simple 2 feet to 2 feet things like their spring releves, I have them do a demi-détourné, where they're in fifth, they plie, they spring and flip like a pancake and face the back wall. That is the first turn that I do in a Pointe class. It's 2 feet to 2 feet, and it just gets the body used to going in one piece, which is another bonus of pirouette from fifth that I forgot to mention. If you teach pirouette from fifth before you do pirouette from fourth or piqué turn, or even soutenu turn, pirouette from fifth has fewer opportunities to twist weird, and so you turn as one piece, which makes everything way easier. It's the next year when we do pirouette from fifth, but not in the beginning of the year, right? Because in the first year, we were just 2 feet to 2 feet the whole time in the center. So we need to build up the balance. We need to build up the strength. We need to practice 2 feet to 1 foot before we add the turn. But by the end of the second year, we are ready to be adding the pirouette from fifth. And then in the meantime, we've been working on the piqué to susu or piqué posé, which would be into any position like a retiré or a coup de pied or an attitude, something like that. We've been working on that at the bar so that when we get into the third year, then we're ready to do that. If you're looking at it in a calendar year instead of like school year, but like a January to January calendar year, starting with pirouette from fifth position, it means like functionally you're teaching the pirouette from fifth position in like March, and then they're ready to start the piqué turns or the soutenu turns in like October. They're not as separated as you maybe as you might think when you look at them in a curriculum and you think, oh, they are in different years. That feels like a long time, but functionally it's about 6 months. If you're ever unsure of whether your students are ready for a particular step in your Pointe class, just think, is it 2 feet to 2 feet, 2 feet to 1, 1 to 2, 1 to the other, or 1 to the same? So you need to identify how difficult is the vocabulary, and then you need to think, okay, where is the student's strength at? And at some point they need a challenge. Like at some point you need to say, okay, they are ready to try this new thing, but knowing where they are and what the vocabulary is, just looking at it from a brute foot strength perspective can really help you determine how to pace things. And if you feel like you want more guidance about when to introduce what steps, I do have a Pointe curriculum that I've created. It's available on my website, geekyballerina.com. You also can sign up for my newsletter on my website. It comes out once a month, and I talk about technique tips and elements of artistry and share resources that are currently helping me in my teaching practice because, I'm still teaching, I'm still learning, and I'm still having a great time every day. As always, I hope you have a really great class.